we'll kind of let everybody get settled, but I would like to welcome you all to tonight's event. I hope everyone's enjoying themselves so far and making some new connections, getting food, that sort of thing. My name is Hannah Jennings, and I'm an event coordinator for Tech in Motion. And if this is your first event, welcome. If you're here back in October, we're glad to see you here again. Tech in Motion is really all about bringing together industry leaders to discuss the most trending and timely IT topics of the day, and that's exactly what we're going to do here today with our wonderful panel. We'll be exploring the evolving risks of AI adoption, how organizations are securing autonomous systems, and what these leaders are seeing firsthand. Following the moderated conversation, we'll open the floor to audience Q&A, so begin thinking if you have any specific questions for our panelists, and I'll bring around the microphone and you can ask any follow-up. To kick things off, I'm excited to welcome Logan from Motion Recruitment, our founding partner, who will share a few opening remarks before we begin the panel.
Welcome, welcome. So it's great to see a lot of familiar faces. It's crazy that I feel like I've known some of you for, I don't know, 5, almost 10 years in some cases. And it's great to actually start to match a face to a voice on the telephone. I am Logan Opoliski. I run Motion Recruitment's cyber and infrastructure staffing team. Been here for almost 10 years now. It's crazy that, again, I feel like I know most of you in this room now. Motion Recruitment is the name behind Tech in Motion. We're really proud of being able to put these events on. I think that we've probably been doing this now for 15, almost 20 years. So the cybersecurity events are definitely what we want to keep putting on. I want to thank our marketing team for being able to put this together. This is super impressive, and I know it can be an absolute logistical nightmare. I want to thank all of you guys for actually coming out and sitting and listening to our panelists here. This is definitely going to be highly relevant for everybody. And I want to thank my cyber and infrastructure team. I know they put in a lot of hard work marketing around this. Everybody, honestly, in the office has put in a lot of effort, so thank you all for doing that. For those of you that don't know, Kelly Services was actually, Motion and Kelly Services have actually joined forces over the past 2 years now. It's really given Motion the ability to integrate with a lot of larger clients, supporting them outside of just our typical perm and contract staffing. So if you have any questions, feel free to grab me or anybody at the Motion booth after the event. I think that cybersecurity and AI have really been 2 hot topics over the course of the past 3-5 years, and I think it's pretty apparent at this point that AI isn't going anywhere, and cybersecurity seems to be one of the most impacted markets in IT. So honestly, without further ado, I'm going to pass the microphone to Chris here, and he can run it from here. Chris?
Well, thank you, Tech in Motion, and appreciate everyone for joining us. Just want to tell you a little bit about myself. My name is Chris Maenner. Besides running B-Sides Philly, I run a company called Palmtree Ventures, where we're mainly focused on building startups, small businesses, or product development. Some companies I helped support over the years is GoPuff. I also supported Comcast, helping them grow their internal product design. And then currently, I work for a company called Ebor Technology, where we're automating the SDLC for AI agents and growing small businesses as well as corporations for manufacturing and robotics. So it's a little bit about myself. Wanted to pass it over to our panelists. Just give a round of applause before we start. A lot of people here are, wonderful. So with that, I just want to introduce Jenny. So Jenny, tell me a little bit about yourself and tell us what you do.
I'm Jenny Menna. I'm the Chief Security Officer at Sallie Mae. That means I have not only cybersecurity, but physical and executive protection, which I thought was a little other duty is assigned until the United Healthcare assassination. And I've spent a whole lot of time learning about things like ballistic glass since then, which were a little out of my space. But I'm also on the board of the FSI SAC. So for anyone who's in financial services, that's how banks share cyber threat information with each other in great detail, but also sharing best practices so that we don't all have to learn the same lesson. We can learn from other people's mistakes and successes.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Jenny. Robert, go ahead. Tell me a little about yourself.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you, Chris, Logan, and Hannah for organizing all this and dealing with our organization over the past week, and to my fellow panelists. Thanks all for being here today. My name is Robert Pimentel, and I am currently the Director of Offensive Security at Humana, responsible for penetration testing, red team, breach and attack simulation, bug bounty, etc. I have about 14 years of experience in IT operations and offensive and network security, and have had the fortune of working in organizations from small size organizations to global multi-billion-dollar enterprises with customers all over the world. In my free time, I perform security research and share my knowledge in conferences like DEF CON and some invite-only events all over the world. So,
Great. Thank you so
Silas.
much, Robert.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Silas, tell us a little bit about yourself.
I'm Silas Adams. I am the CISO at Pep Boys. I'm also the de facto head of AI. So I was voluntold to do that. So been in security for 22 years. This is my third CISO role. Been in multi-billion-dollar organizations for all three. So have a wealth of experience. Came from public sector, CIA, DARPA, NSA, U.S. Cyber Command. Matriculated over to the private space, and now I'm at Pep Boys. So.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Go ahead, Matt. Tell us a little about yourself.
So my name is Matt Franz, came up the road from Baltimore, glad to be back in Philly. Got involved in cyber before it was called cyber, so late 1990s, also through military connections down in San Antonio. I've done the rounds at Cisco, Tenable, Mandiant, CrowdStrike, Ping Identity. Right now I work for an AWS and GCP service partner named Bespin Global. What I'm doing is I'm building out AI SOC capabilities on Google SecOps, so writing blue team agents, doing threat hunting, having a lot of fun. Been heavy all in AI for the last 3 years, learning a ton because not something I'd done before. So
Wonderful.
appreciate being on the panel.
No, of course, and thank you all for coming. So a little bit about us with Motion Technology. We're going to be talking really around leveraging AI. So with the first question, I want to send it over to Silas. Where are you seeing AI deliver real value today?
So I want to, loud, my bad. So I want to level set on what we articulate as value. I think value to every organization is a bit different. So when we're talking about specifically in consumer retail or especially automotive retail, we want to talk about one piece of value is operational uplift. If I can actually make my team more efficient or efficient operations more broadly, we have higher margins, and higher margins means better cash flow. Another thing that we have seen in Pep Boys is innovation side. The true thing about innovation is it will drive value. If the faster you can innovate, the more risk you can intelligently take on. You have a faster speed to market, you have a faster delivery cycle, and you can actually accrete value from your existing customer base. So the other side of that coin or value is actually innovation, right? And the last side of this piece here is, the third piece would be, I can actually protect revenue. I can actually avoid loss a lot better. And that is actually tangible return on security investment or return on risk, right? So all of these translate into board objectives. Now, where we're seeing value at it from a technical or from a tactical perspective is that one piece is going to be developer activity, right? Because we have AI or agentic AI that can be asynchronous in nature inside the developer's IDE autonomously. And then we have synchronous agents that can actually work with the developer in line in their IDE. Where we see that value is that we can actually give runtime context from the way our applications work using DAST and AIST tools, tie that into our CNAP. We can actually deliver that context live to the AI agents that exist in the IDE or in the developer's inline activities in terms of the day-to-day coding that they do. How that translates is the higher velocity, less downtime when they actually deliver products, and more predictable products. From a SecOps side is I can have AI agents naturally tell me what's going on from every alert. I can actually train those AI agents to take action. We can actually integrate those with MCP services from across the organization to actually influence and take action. And then we can intelligently put in human in the loop for all of us who needs to comply with like SOX and some other regulations. But that's where we're seeing a lot of AI innovation today, and that's what kind of where Pep Boys is driving. And I think that's where we really are seeing the rubber meet the road in terms of getting away from AI pet projects and saying, we're going to do AI to do this for the sake of AI and actually deliver value to our bottom line, our investors, and our shareholders.
Great. No, thank you, Silas. That was great. And moving on, what we're going to be talking about next is the AI risk and shadow AI. So we have a couple questions here around that, and I want to pose it over to Jenny. So Jenny, where are organizations introducing the most risk with AI currently?
Well, it depends. I think in understanding AI risk, you can't just understand the technology. You have to really understand what your business does, what's really important to you. And I just got off the plane last night from RSA, where I heard from one side from the vendors all the fabulous things that AI can do, and then as much gloom and doom as you could possibly imagine of risk created by AI and risk created by bad guys using AI. So, from a risk perspective, as much as security people may want to say, we're just going to disconnect from everything, we're not going to use AI, our businesses won't thrive if we don't find a way to allow and enable AI innovation. Whether it's our, the business partners, whether it's us within security. We can't keep up with the bad guys that are going to use AI on us unless we're also using AI. So how do we do that? You have to understand your business. What's really important? How do you connect? What are your regulatory requirements if you're in a regulated agency? How does your tech stack really work? What's connected? Who are your vendors? Who are their vendors? And then how do you constantly set a process to keep up with all of those things? So I'll give you an example. And what's important, right? So I'll give you an example of that. You may have very sensitive customer data that you would be fined into oblivion if somebody accidentally uploaded it into a public version of an AI tool and then it was released, right? You would have a privacy breach there, right? That could be very expensive. On the other hand, you could have something, and this is a real world example that I had at my company. People came to our AI working group and said, our brand team wants to use ChatGPT Enterprise Edition. And one of my architects said, I've got this, well, this is the security stack we're going to build to enable that. What exactly are they doing with this? Oh, they're checking data that sees if people like when we turn a color from blue to green, and are people visiting the same. Like, I don't care. Let her go to town, right? I care about this other piece of the business. I care about the fact that we want to enable a MuleSoft function that can autonomously take action with all of the developers' permissions, which if you set it up wrong, could delete everything on their machine and take action across every web tab. So what's important to your business? What is the use case of how someone is going to use it? And then work with them to reduce the risk balanced with the business risk of not doing it. It's really complicated.
No, that sounds good. And I'm glad you brought that up around usage. So how do you look at AI, like shadow IT AI usage at this point? Do you feel like if you have proper guardrails around it, you'll be okay with it from a financial perspective? Or is there something else that you want to maybe kind of dive into?
So you obviously have to have monitoring so that you know what people are doing. Constantly looking at where are things going. Do you want to block certain domains? Do you want to have an easy path for certain AI tools that people are trained on, and where you've set up the right guardrails so that if I want to do X with this tool, okay, but we have these other 3 that do the exact same thing that we've already set up guardrails, move over there. So I think there's a lot of monitoring going on, but also if you get a couple wins when somebody asks about a use case, like the brand team that doesn't really matter, they're more willing to come to you and ask rather than try to end run on their home laptop.
Yeah, I could imagine. Yeah.
But it's challenging. There's a lot of monitoring that's got to go on and logging.
No, it's great that you brought that up with monitoring. And we're going to pass this over to Franz because he's the expert when it comes to doing SOC and blue team. So we're talking about shadow AI detection here. And with shadow AI detection, Franz, how are organizations detecting and managing shadow AI from your perspective so far?
So it's interesting. I first encountered the term shadow IT back in the mid 2000s, and I was sort of offended at the time because I was really guilty of that, because I was in a security research group, and the first thing we did when we got our laptops is we installed our own version of Linux, did not have the corporate image, had no sort of monitoring. And the problem was the standard corporate image did not allow us to run all our network security tools and wireless sniffing and all that. So part of what the enterprise needs to provide is that golden path. There is a need. The reason why people use shadow SaaS, shadow IT, is they have a need to do their job. They want to do their job, and unless the organization provides that, blessed enterprise, governed, monitored, platform, they'll use their own. And actually, 3 years ago, the first incident that I saw was it came through our Code 42 DLP alert. It saw a ChatGPT upload of a spreadsheet of customer data, and I started working, because I was the director of SecOps at the time, started working with HR, and guess what? It was their personal ChatGPT account. So therefore, I could not get approval to have them delete that account. And this was 3 years ago. Things have gotten a lot better. You have ability to run your own cloud models in your, if you're in an AWS environment in Bedrock, so it's fully governed and meets the standards of the rest of your infrastructure. And OpenAI and Azure all have these kind of enterprise. But from a detection standpoint, I think all the data is there. It's just the challenge is, how do you correlate? Because if you look at most of your next-gen antivirus, your Sentinel-1, your CrowdStrike, you have the ability to detect the network calls, the file system access, the signatures, the process trees. But are there signatures to be able to know, okay, this is Claude Code doing X, Y, Z, or this is Codex? So the telemetry is there. The challenge is, how do you correlate that across the network from your network proxy to your EDR? And then one of the, from these folks that are in large enterprises, how do you decide there's so many security solutions that all require endpoint agents. That endpoint agent sprawl is a major problem. So the tech is there, the telemetry there, but it's very much a challenge to kind of learn those fact patterns and be able to operationalize those detections.
No, exactly. Like being able to see the telemetry at the lowest level of the OS to see what the AI is doing could be something really good. So like with that, what gaps exist in your current detection capabilities that you've seen? So like we talked about Bedrock and using Google Cloud to actually use your models. Like what other gaps do you see that maybe you could enlighten the team here with?
From what I see, a lot of the telemetry is there, but the challenge is the correlation. And how do you have disparate SIMs? You have so many different products to be able to kind of connect the dots. And just the lack of signatures in the mainstream products. And then, like I said, it is very tough to be a buyer. And if you just came back from RSA, there are so many agentic security platforms out there. Knowing which to pick, do you build your own? Do you go with your existing security vendor? It's a tough to be a buyer at the moment because there's just too much to pick
especially from. With like a good sales team. That's really what you need right now, I think, more than anything, unfortunately.
Can I add color to that response?
So moving on to that, I want to move on to enterprise controls and governance. So I want to bring this over to Robert. So Robert, what controls should organization prioritize have you been seeing from an offensive security perspective?
Thanks for queuing that up, Chris. I think that Silas, Jenny, and Matt's answer is a good base here. Silas was speaking to how do we protect the business, and from the offensive security perspective is how do we avoid an event or recover from an event that takes away our hard-earned revenue. From Jenny's perspective is how do we focus on the things that do matter? And Matt's perspective is, from an offensive security perspective, how do I find guys that are doing what he's doing and avoiding the friction that is introduced by the guardrails that we build to keep our business safe? So from a governance perspective, I think that all of these problems are inherited from the pre-AI era. Nothing has changed. All that has changed is that we have this new tool that is being hyped up the wazoo, like Chris is mentioning, and presents a wealth of opportunities for those that are playing on the offensive side, whether it's vetted and ethically done, or whether you have some sort of criminal intent, right? So what I'm getting at is you have to understand what it is that you have around you, like your inventory, what it is that you're responsible for. Because at times, and having performed countless operations of reconnaissance, enumeration, and trying to understand the size of the target that I'm going to attack, I have a better understanding of what the organization's assets are than the own organization. And the bigger the organization, whether it's a Fortune 10, 5, 50, the truer that becomes, sadly. From the other aspect is controlling really, and it sounds, like Matt's mentioning, the friction is a real problem. But that is where the opportunity lies. The amount of developers that we've compromised, that we're bypassing the guardrails of where they're supposed to store source code, where they're supposed to store their credentials, just to make it easier for themselves to deliver faster and have to meet the expectations that leaders like Jenny or Silas have of them, of ship faster and use this new tool. Just takes people to cut corners, right? So if you understand the incentive model of what you're facing and what you're protecting, I think that you're ahead of the curve in that aspect. And you can cut through a lot of the noise that Matt is mentioning, right? Because now everything and everybody's promising you that they've solved security because they have AI and N8N slapped on the marketing deck.
Yeah, no, totally. And I think, Silas, you brought up a couple of good points at the beginning around delivering real value with AI. So I want you to answer, maybe follow up with what Robert was talking about. Like, how do these translate into governance and compliance for companies to protect against offensive security threats?
So when we're talking about governance and compliance of AI, it kind of is amalgamation of everything that everyone on the panel's already talked about, right? We have these tools that can give us telemetry and so on and so forth. And then instead of heuristically looking at corollary kind of objects, we can do it semantically, where we get context and we become enriched because we have AI at our disposal, right? So we get away from heuristic analysis and say, okay, we need static kind of variables to say, yes, this is bad, or no, this is not bad, and start to look at context. So the way somebody's doing something and all of a sudden does something differently doesn't necessarily mean they're malicious. So when we talk about governance and compliance around these things, we have to look at our frameworks, and we have to pick which framework or which amalgamation of frameworks are going to give us the ability to keep our organization agile, keep our cost of controls down, keep our audit burdens light, right? And how can I now use AI to help alleviate a lot of that compliance and friction, right? A lot of this really stems from around what Franz said. I'm sorry, I used your last name, military. Kind of, it is what it is. But if the golden path or the easiest path is the most secure path, and I have telemetry around that, I don't care what you do. I can decentralize the AI use, allow for faster innovation with the user level, but I can get telemetry. I can get everything you clicked on. I can get provenance in the AI, meaning the invocation that your agent makes to a model. I can get all of that. I can get, if you interact with the model directly, your inputs and your outputs in your file. And now I can persist all of that governance and compliance and tie it all together and integrate it with common tools that we see, right? And again, that's the buyer's dilemma now, is what tool am I going to apply that gives me layered defense, 360-degree visibility, and defensibility, visibility on the AI tools that I use from the inside out and also from the outside in. And that's the buyer's dilemma, but we all are going to get more educated as this time goes on, because there's going to be a new thing that the auditors and regulators come down on and say, we need to find this or do this. So it's a learning curve for everybody, but being intelligent about the risk you adopt and being intelligent about what you actually need to get visibility on, that's going to arm you pretty well.
No, that's a great answer. And like a good example of that is like, OpenClaw was the hot baby on the corner for the last 3 weeks, but like Claude Code just released their remote management, which basically took them right out. So it's just like, it's so ever changing. It's gonna be really difficult to find. And that leads me over to you, Jenny. You came over from RSA and you saw a lot of hype, I guess is the most polite way you can kind of say. And with vendor AI hype, tell me a little bit, like, how do you evaluate whether AI solutions actually deliver value? And give me some use cases on how you're looking at Sallie Mae.
Sure, and yeah, Robert's absolutely right. Like, everybody has added a .ai to their name. Everything is empowered by AI. Everybody's putting the sticker on there, right, saying that they are the AI company. And some of them will be game-changing technologies, and some of it's probably snake oil. And so, as they said in the military, trust but verify. I think that's what we have to do with our vendors. So I went to Microsoft pre-day for RSA, and they are going to be releasing the E7 license along with Agent 365 for general availability in May. Do we believe we have to make vendor selections? Do we believe, right? Because we're all down to a handful of vendor suites, right? There's the Google Wiz suite, there's the Palo family of tools, there's the E7 license. It's dizzying because they all sound like they do the same thing. And we all have a bunch of licenses that already include the new tool. So I think constantly looking at what is that Venn diagram, talking to our peers about what does and doesn't work, right? Silas and I were kind of whispering about what we really think about is going to be ready for general availability. At the CISO meeting at RSA, everybody was kind of, what do you think about this? What about the new CrowdStrike AI DR tool we're hearing about, right? So talk to your friends and colleagues, but also test yourself, because some things may work in one environment for a smaller company, but may not scale to a larger organization. I think you also need to, we bought a really cool startup AI tool called BlueJay, which simulates voices and video to test IVR and other systems. So we were sold, or we were doing a beta of a well-known company's deep fake detection system. And so we used this, this BlueJay tool to simulate voices in addition to a couple real employees. I can tell you this tool still has not recognized a very lovely woman in my Indianapolis office who I can assure you I have had lunch and dinner with as a human. Still don't recognize her, and caught about 10% of the BlueJay simulated.
Oh wow, that's insane.
So test and use AI to test other AI.
Good idea. Yeah, like have agents testing agents. And with that, before we move on to a couple of questions here, I just want to take a poll real quick because I haven't really engaged with anyone here. Anyone who does more offensive security? Raise your hand. 1, 2? Okay, 2. All right, good. What about defensive security? All right, so we're more of the defensive security front, and maybe we recruiters and
Wait, Chris, don't we all do defensive security one way or another?
It depends. It depends. I guess it depends.
The offense informs the defense, as they say.
So with that, I wanted to pivot over back to Robert about offensive AI, because especially in the DEF CON, if you guys go to DEF CON, Red Team Village and the offensive is usually the highlight, right? And we need to start thinking about that with AI, like how now defenders could actually protect against people like Robert. So with Robert, what new attack opportunities does AI introduce, and what have you seen for defenders to prepare for that?
Chris, I got hung up on something. What it means to protect against me, I'm helping protect you and your organizations. Let's just make that clear. That being said, something I want to also highlight is to the whole like vendor discussion and stuff is Jenny here left a very strong reputation at Humana by being able to sniff BS. Right? They said that you couldn't get it past her, right? So to that extent, there's 3 areas where I'm focusing my program with the use of AI. Like it was already mentioned, using AI to target AI, using AI to target traditional systems, and using AI to drive down the cost of identifying risk. With using AI to target AI, we are at a stage where the rate of, or the velocity of change, every week something new, that new thing, yes, it might have some functionalities, but also it has a new attack surface to explore. You can download, you can go in Twitter, look at whatever's trending on the hashtag AI, find the top 3, top 5 tweets, go on GitHub, and you will find a CVE or 2 easily. So what I'm getting at is like this opportunity for disruption has, as an attacker, maybe 3 years ago, the economics of getting in were such that if you had enough time, you will find the hole eventually. And that line of time in the x-axis now has compressed dramatically because I can do things at machine speed that I can just go for coffee. And by the time I'm back, this thing, if you know how to ask for the right thing, this thing has done it all for you. It has also brought down the cost of succeeding as an attacker, I would say maybe 2,000 times down. And I am speaking to real numbers from a program of penetration testing, red teaming, we all the stuff that I mentioned at the beginning, right? Writing exploits where there's numbers around the frontier models of being able to exploit with 90% success a one-day-old exploit that doesn't even have any proof of concept code out there, right? These are things that you needed to have years of context and experience to be able to pull off manually and already be adept at technology. Now, if you can speak and articulate clearly what it is that you're trying to do, anybody can hack anything. And it sounds almost too hyped to be true, but I'm experiencing, and I'm very hands-on despite being in a leadership role.
That's good to hear. Yeah, and it's funny you say that. It's like you can even hook up OpenClaw to Kali Linux now, and it just can do your bidding from Teleport or Telegram. You know?
And help you trade cryptocurrency at the same time.
Exactly. Yes. So now, Franz, pivot back instead of offensive. Let's talk about SOC automation and AI. So tell me what kind of tools you've been using to like detect these new attacks. Like anything that you can highlight that will help the people in business.
Sure. So those of you that are active on LinkedIn, that are on the blue team side, kind of AI SOC vendors is almost a meme level. There's dozens to probably hundreds. It's a very noisy space.
I'm releasing one next week.
Say again?
I'm releasing one next week.
Oh yeah, for sure. It's easy to vibe code them, but I think, and I've seen the evolution of the early adopters, maybe 2 years, where let's say Elastic added a new ability to add MITRE attack, or most of the vendors now are adding the ability to take advantage of human language search, so you don't need to switch back and forth between SPL and KQL and EQL, and then there's YARA-L, which Google uses, where I'm working right now. But I think so there's a lot of noise in this space, and you have traditional MDR vendors, ReliaQuest, Expel, all saying, and Arctic Wolf, all having those capabilities. But where I'm really seeing a lot of value is if your SIEM/SOAR vendor, and we use Google SecOps, formerly known as Chronicle, has those MCP servers, it is very effective to use your standard, Codex, Claude, Gemini. Just pick your coding CLI, hook it up to it, and you can do some amazing threat hunting in order to iterate, creating artifacts, repeated queries, and writing an MCP server is not actually that difficult once you've done it a couple of times. I wrote one in a couple of hours for another CNAP vendor that I thought the open source, the only open source implementation I saw was a bit sketchy. So okay, see if I can code this up. And I was able to quickly, pull AWS infrastructure, build a diagram of the Kubernetes clusters, the network path. So I think the capabilities that are available to SOC analysts now, just by using a Codex, a Claude, or a Gemini CLI, there's a lot that you can do. And then there's the whole realm of, and this is kind of what we're doing in my day job, is using the agent frameworks like Crew AI, LangChain, Agno to replicate that human behavior of tier 1 analyst, tier 2 analyst, and build out teams of agents exchanging information with the A2A protocol to replicate those workflows. So I think this is an amazing time. The key is, figuring out what you want to do. What are those processes? It's easy to whip up code, but if you don't have that foundation of what's that expertise of what are those human processes, where do you want to have humans, where do you want to have agents making decisions and assessments, and who's accountable for those artifacts? Those are the harder problems. The tech is there. It's thinking about what you want to do from a security operations, perspective.
Yeah, that's great. And like process and cash flow to do these things, that's going to be like the next big endeavor, right? Because anyone can build anything nowadays. It's just imagination and figuring out how to like fit your business needs. So with that, last week with the CEO, Jensen Huang from NVIDIA, talked about the new agent OS, right? He was really highlighting OpenClaw as like it was a groundbreaking event, how operating systems are going to be the new agents. And this is what he presented in front of the world. So with that, I'm gonna send this over to Silas. Agentic AI, how are you using agentic AI in practice or just on your spare time, like outside of your own business? And tell me, like, where do you see this going if we see Jensen kind of articulating this to the world right now?
So agentic AI is really going to be a kind of a paradigmatic shift in organizational operations. Agentic AI is, we can have AI agents, but when you have agentic AI, there's orchestration layers. There's, just like we have the OSI model, we have layers of architecture around agentic AI. I think we are at 8 layers at this point, and a lot of that comes from the need to autonomously kind of allow the agents to make decisions, to scale your organization, to scale your processes. That really targets margin, right? So a lot of money is going into building out agentic capabilities at the enterprise level, right? Some interesting use cases that I've come across is one from a SecOps perspective, right? Every one of these tools that I've bought or procured has an AI agent within them, right? And then the next question I ask is, are you exposing an MCP server that I can allow an agent to interact with the other agent in the other tool, right? So this is a real life kind of scenario. Is I have CrowdStrike that has Charlotte. I have Salt, which is our API runtime posture security tool that has Pepper, right? We have Wiz, which has Mika and other integrated agents inside those, right? So from an agentic perspective, the non-human identity is already scoped for me, right? Now I just have to govern, okay, well, how am I going to allow this agent to talk to this agent? And at what point does that correlate back to my SIM? And I can now interrogate the SIM semantically, not heuristically. The agents are now contextually aware at all layers of my organization, 360 degrees, right? So from code to cloud in GitHub, from the IDE for the MCP registries that sit in VS Code or IntelliJ, right? And then all the way over to my runtime application, which is my DAST or IAST, all the way through to my APIs on how my applications integrate with other applications, whether it's AutoZone or Auto Integrate or any of these other tools, right? And now I have an agentic ecosystem that I didn't have to build the individual agents. I just had to give them the parameters in which they could talk to each other. And now they can talk to each other autonomously via natural language. God forbid I put a webhook that can now send me a message in Slack or Teams, and now I can interrogate them from my productivity suite using integrations in Microsoft GraphQL or Slack webhooks, right? So this is one use case at Pep-Boys where we're seeing and we're trending very quickly towards a SecOps function that can just be interrogated via natural language, and I can go tell it to do something. Or it can do it autonomously. Level 1, level 2 triage, level 3 support or remediation. The next piece here that I really find interesting, and I think there's going to be a lot of operational uplift, is the things in the day-to-day basis that really increase human cognitive workload, right? Contract management systems. Like, I don't know if you guys ever took a time study on how much time your governance, risk, and compliance function does on contract management, putting things in there, routing them to the right people, yada, yada, yada. Imagine you can go just stand up a AI agent and Copilot, give it the appropriate tools, which are all already vetted by Microsoft's team, and say, give it this permission, this scope, and this function, and go do my contract management for me. I know it's not happening, but it's really on the cusp, because Cobblestone is now in Microsoft's Copilot, right? And now I can create an agent, and I have low code, no code kind of scenarios where I can just tell the agent what to do, give it its parameters and guardrails, and give it its instructions, meaning do not do this. The worst thing you can do is build an agent, not give it the negative context, and all of a sudden it's reinforcement learning and goes off on a tangent and does something crazy, right? That's obviously been a thing for a couple of times, but I think those two agentic use cases, and obviously everyone knows the developer use case of asynchronous and synchronous agents. But
no, exactly, and this is going to change. I mean, we're seeing rapid change all the time. We can't predict anything, and I want to take this over to our lightning round, because I want to open up for questions. I see everyone here; they look interested, and I want you to challenge like some ideas or ask questions around what we can help you with, or help you with any kind of questions and answers. So, all the panelists, I want to pose this question to you. I was going to ask you like biggest impact for 5 years, but we can't do that. It's impossible now. We're already seeing it. So tell me, we'll start with Robert. Biggest AI security risk to organizations that you're unprepared for?
Not keeping informed with what's happening. When I see a lag of frontier models of 9-10 months, that is 9-10 months that you're behind. The adversaries are actively attacking you using those tools.
That's great. What about you, Jenny?
So some of the most kind of depressing stuff I heard out at RSA was, by the time a CVE is published, now that we are moving at this true machine speed, it will be attacked before you can get your 30-day aggressive patching timeline done. So how do we get in front of that? Someone else, I'm stealing a quote, said threat intelligence is no longer intelligence, it's an obituary. Because by the time, right, so look at FSISAC, by the time I share with Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, we are not actually personally related, but everybody thinks we are, right? What I've seen, now that helps them. With AI, the adversaries will be able to move so fast and are moving so fast that paradigm of indicator sharing that we've used for so long, right, is not going to keep up. So how do we get ahead of that?
That's a good one. What about you, Matt?
Something I think about is, and I'm currently, even though I've done large or enterprise organizations, but right now I'm my customers and, I'm definitely in the small, medium business space. But this concept of the security poverty line is those organizations that are struggling just with basic governance and hygiene. How is it possible and they couldn't even do pre-AI security, and they're being asked to solve all these problems. And I think the cognitive overload of how, if you're working in this space and you're dealing with agents, it's painful trying to understand these black boxes and these machines that are often, you don't know what's going on and surprising, and how that translates into organizational roles and responsibilities and the chaos. I think there's going to be organizational chaos, and then there may be a retrenchment. So I think the organizational, thinking about it from the socio-technical aspect of how do communication inside teams, roles and responsibilities. I think that's the tech stuff is, that's something that we know, but how organizations keep up with non-human identities, accountability, and aspects.
No, that's great. And like the cognitive, you're talking about the human aspect, and that's perfect for Silas. Ex-military, like the Marines, that's what they went after, the human. So like Silas, what about you? Wrap it all up.
What was the question again? The risk?
Yeah, so basically security risk to organizations that you're unprepared for.
Yeah, I mean, the security risk for organizations that are unprepared, I think, you nailed it, is organizations that stumbled at basic cyber hygiene are the ones most at risk, right? And the wide-reaching, pervasive kind of tone I see across all organizations is the data loss prevention, the data governance layer. All AI really wants to do is take your data and give you insight from it, right? It's non-deterministic. The input, we transform it and give you a most probabilistic kind of output based on your context, right? And in my mind, I think, okay, well, data security, data governance, DSPM, DLPs, tagging your data, classifying your data, right? These are, at that enterprise data architecture layer, that is where I see most organizations as unprepared, and that's where I see most organizations as at risk, right? Because the minute I can now have provenance over where my data goes, data mapping, data egress, data ingress, I have protections, I can tag it, I can classify it, and I can now force an AI to respect it. I can hit the ground running as fast as I want with AI. I am innovating at the speed at which they are innovating. So, I mean, data is probably my most overarching kind of risk area.
Yeah, could imagine. So thank you, panelists. You were wonderful. Round of applause for them, please. Thank you. So with that, does anyone have any specific questions? And I'll just recap. So like maybe, and perfect, we'll go with the gentleman first. We had a couple, we talked about AI value and security, AI risk and shadow AI, vendor AI hype, offensive security. So let me know, I'll take it. Any kind of questions you have around that, just let me know. I'll go with you, Matt, first.
A lot of commentary on risk mitigation via AI. I would love to hear the panelists' commentary on recovery from an attack using AI. Positives you may see from it, negatives you may see from it. Let's say you have the immutable backup, you have an isolated recovery environment, you have a standby production environment, but the old adage of it's not if, it's when. How do you all see AI coming in from that aspect of it?
Thank you, Matt.
I'll take a
As a
step.
pro or con? AI helping or AI being one of the weaknesses that makes it harder to recover?
All right, I'm gonna go out on a limb here. I'm on the positive side, right? I don't know if you could tell, but I like AI. Just saying. I don't care how much risk it brings. No, I'm kidding. I care. But so disaster recovery, resiliency, business continuity. the way I see this going and kind of how I'm running our security program and our AI adoption and governance is that I want self-healing infrastructure, I want self-healing code, and I want self-healing applications at runtime, right? So if I don't have to sit here and say, okay, it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of, huh? I know, I mean, this is, I love it, right? Because this is very interesting because imagine earlier when I was talking to you about how everything is integrated and all the agents can talk to one another. Well, if I have an asynchronous agent in IDE that's on all the time and 24/7, and then a new exploit in my runtime application comes up because one of my software bill of materials or something in my architecture is at an end of life, right? And the new vulnerability shows up. My CNAP that's connected to my code or cloud or my DAS can now give context and enrichment to that agent in my IDE to now code my infrastructure, right? Because infrastructure as code is what it is. It's infrastructure as code.
Go
So,
Terraform.
Terraform is infrastructure as code, but yeah. I can actually now tell it to go adjust my Terraform recipe, send and stage a pull request, have a human in the loop via Slack, say, go review this pull request. And now all I can do is tell the human, hey, go respond yes to that. I have invocation and provenance on everything down the line so I don't increase my regulatory burden. And then now I have self-healing infrastructure as code. Now, anytime there's a misconfiguration in my AWS environment, my runtime DAS analysis tool and my CNAP pick it up automatically, deliver that telemetry back to my agent. My agent codes the Terraform file and then sends a webhook to my developer to say, review this pull request. I have zero human cognitive workload, and now I have a faster time to remediation using all AI. My business continuity plan and resiliency plan is actually to self-heal as things become exploitable. And I don't really care about SaaS because SaaS gives me enrichment, but a SaaS vulnerability isn't necessarily exploitable unless you're Rob, right? So I mean, I think that is one piece that's a pro. I have 3 other scenarios where I think it's a pro, but I hope that answers your question. I'll give it to Jenny to tell you how it sucks.
No, I mean, I think maybe sucks is the wrong word, but as we think about business continuity, right, and business impact assessment, we're becoming more and more dependent on Bedrock, ChatGPT, Copilot, Claude. Are we thinking about concentration risk? Are we thinking about how our other key vendors, right? Just like we're thinking about, is Salesforce located in just AWS East, or is this key provider located in just right there, the multi-layer dependencies? Are we thinking about the continuity of these tools and what might happen if they go down? Because we've seen a lot of what I'd call kind of core providers go down, and there is that ripple effect. So we need to add that to our thinking about response and recovery and what we put into our contracts.
Yeah, basically, like
Resilience.
going back to like drift management. That's going to be a big thing. Like, how do we manage global drift management for risk and behavior? So that's great.
Well, and
Another
also,
question for you?
I
yeah,
think this idea that just like you have the idea of multi-cloud, you need to have multi-foundation model. When I'm doing analysis in Gemini threat hunting, it's very flowery and paranoid, and I use Claude to correct it so it doesn't exaggerate. So how do you deal with multi-foundation mod? You can't rely on a single vendor. You have to have that.
It has to be
redundancy.
multi. Yeah, exactly. And you have a question here?
I do. Okay. So to give a little bit of context, this is going to kind of span talent acquisition and development as well as kind of AI. But I am coming from a background of tech content marketing and PR into the cyber sphere. And from what I see is this landscape, this risk landscape is rapidly expanding with NHIs, stale accounts, all of these things. So within a cyber acquisition and development landscape that is a bit chaotic and becoming more so. So my question for you is, for early career professionals, where do you see the biggest opportunity to contribute like meaningfully in AI-driven security environments today, especially when like the how to do that is kind of, there's no agreement on that?
I'd like to take that one if you don't mind. Who here likes memes? Who here has seen the meme of the quadrants of the professionals using AI and not using AI? And the squares go a little bit like this. At the bottom, you have the individuals not yet using AI. At the top, you have the individuals already using AI. On the left and the right, the difference is whoever has judgment and whoever does not have judgment. And the ones that don't have judgment, that prior were maybe average, mediocre, low performers, Now with AI, they are they call them slop cannons because they're just putting out a bunch of stuff that it's not even QA'd and low quality, and that applies to knowledge-based production, so documents, policy, etc., to code, and I'm sure that Silas has some guardrails around detecting all the things that you could develop improperly. And on the right-hand side, you have those that have high judgment, that were already high performers, working hard, making sure that the output is of quality. With AI, they become 10, 100, 1,000 in terms of quality, output, volume, velocity, right? And where I'm going with that is I spend all day convincing senior executives like Jenny and Silas on what are the initiatives that we need to prioritize in a world where everything has now multiplied in volume and has become we needed this yesterday, now we needed it last month because we have 200 more things coming up in the pipeline. And by the way, there's 7 CVEs that are being exploited with AI that before would have been from a Monday to a Friday. Now that was just 8 a.m. to noon. So I would say that the early career professionals need to focus on making sense of things, not learning whatever is the latest language, because it's just going to change in a few hours. It's knowing what matters, what is BS, and what protects our customer profile. Because if you're in the Pep Boys business, you probably don't care too much about insurance. And if you're in insurance, you're just trying to avoid being in the next headline. Systems thinking, not systems engineering. And you need the engineering. I'm not dogging on the technical stuff, right? That's what I like in my heart. But when I speak to Jenny types, they're like, what are you trying to say? I don't care about the code.
No, thank you, Robert. Now, and we have another question over here.
On the topic of agentic vulnerability management, do you guys see that as something viable in a larger enterprise? I know there's probably a handful of vendors who maybe focus on the CVE identification side, even less actually doing the full end-to-end workflow. So I'm just curious, is that something that you see as a viable means to helping address vulnerability management more broadly, or is that a little bit too pie in the sky at the current state of the market?
I'll add here. I think the problems that I've seen in SaaS companies and they aren't going to be solved by AI. It's like they don't have reliable deployment. They don't have good asset inventory. They don't have good understanding. So I think it goes back to that kind of Maslow's hierarchy. You have to solve those lower level problems for it even to be relevant. Yes, I think there's a lot of value in terms of how you can manage CVEs and chunk the data, but though I don't think those are the bottlenecks in terms of a vulnerability management program.
No, I totally agree. Another facet of this, especially in the startup realm, is that there are a lot of companies come to fruition that focus on agentic security, right? And I think the concept or the perception that an agent is vulnerable is less of a CVE type of nature and more of I can influence the way this agent is interacting with its environment autonomously. I can change its instructions, right? Or I can change and make vulnerable the tools it uses, which Jenny, eloquently said it's supply chain risk management. It's third and fourth party risk now, right? So the more controls and companies that come into existence that can give you the actual true invocation and provenance of what an agent or a ecosystem of agents are doing at any point in time, and the more the security tool can now contextualize all of that data and say this agent is doing something it shouldn't be, that is where the vulnerabilities of agentic ecosystems come into place, because the minute one agent drifts, that drift is magnified infinitely, very, very quickly, right? So now you have a likelihood or probability of a risk increasing as well as a severity increasing, which magnifies your impact, right, to the organization. So when we talk about agentic security, I think we should start to think about it from a security context of I need to be on top of this non-human identity behavior analytics semantically, because I need to establish provenance and audit logging and monitoring all throughout the ecosystem and detect. And don't ask if it's supposed to do that. The minute you see it, you kill it, right? And that is what a lot of companies should do. I think entropy security is something that's coming out of the seed round out of Israel and a couple other companies that are doing this really well.
Thank you, Silas. Yeah, I have one other question over here.
So I really appreciated the conversation about the paradigmatic shift and also context. I think these were two kind of like things that were really important here. One question that I have is how can we think or rethink AI context to identify threats, not from the data from existing cases, but from the situations that we could not have thought about? So, in other words, we typically think about data driven or evidence based, but now since we have new contexts and new environments, are there any successful cases that you can think of where we can use these new tools to think about environments that we have not seen and not hallucination? Thank you.
You ask a great question about non-hallucination, right? Because eventually, to detect hallucination, you have to literally monitor your model, right? And if you're monitoring your model, you're always reactive. So if I can rephrase your question, you kind of want to see if we can use AI to almost give us predictive context around where risk or threat might be, not now, but in the future, right? Large insurance companies are doing this. AIG is doing this. The Munich Re's of the world are doing this. The power they have is that they have massive amounts of data. And this is how they pretty much drove your insurance policies and risk profiles and what pool to put you in, years ago before there was AI. Where we're seeing use cases, especially out of DARPA and especially out of the CIA's innovation office, is that we are using agents as feedback loops. We are having one agent doing the exponential regression on correlated events, and then we have another agent on the back end doing modeling against multivariate things to identify causation, right? So you have dependent and independent variables and confounding variables, and the AI agents are pretty much all the day, they're doing that. And then within that body, those two agents are talking to each other. And we're taking an input from an action of a human or an input from an action of an organization to say, is this data correlated? Are these data points tied or in a relationship in some way? And what influence from an organization from the outside perspective causes those variables to change and yield an outcome? That is where we're seeing predictive models kind of come from, where we can sit there and say, it is within a 90% confidence interval that we're going to do X or we're going to do Y. And we see insurance companies doing it now. And I think that's where it's going, especially as we get into quantum and our processing power goes up. But I think we're not too far away from predictive AI, agentic or generative in nature.
No, I agree. What Google said, 2029 is now the new quantum break. So we have to be prepared. So we're gonna be ending questions at 8. So I'm gonna try to get to everyone. So just bear with me here. Here you go.
Howdy. And talked about quantum and how we're moving forward with AI. The question that comes to mind is, with so much push for going forward, how do you reevaluate things that we've already moved past? And so if we're talking about, I was in AI-enabled threat for 3 years in Office of Security. And so most mature organizations were usually the standard for, they had a lot of money and they were big. But looks like all 4 of you have been in large organizations. That's not necessarily mature. It just means that you just got a lot of space to secure. So how do you look today to go, how do you reevaluate spaces that you've already covered to go, maybe we need to do this differently? Credential, like Equifax just went passwordless. Like, how do you go back over spaces that you've already done to figure out maybe if we should innovate or not?
I'd like to take a stab at that. Oh, Jenny, go ahead.
I mean, I think that's part of good technology program management even before AI, right? Vendors are in it, but it's accelerated. So the technology offerings, the vendor offerings, the business needs that we have to secure are changing constantly. So it's not something you can do once every 3 to 5 years and come up with your tech strategy, right? It's something you need to be revisiting. Quarterly might not be enough, right? And maybe we can use AI to keep up with all of the changes that are going on. We're putting a tool in place that tracks AI within vendor products so that it can go out and even do things like, oh, they've changed their marketing materials and now say that they're adding X. Oh, we noticed that they've just put a new data center in company Y. You might want to take a look at that. There's no way we could keep on top of that. So I think we can use AI to enable that constant market research. But again, I think we talked a little bit earlier about having forums like this where peers can talk about, hey, what are you doing? How are you seeing? Have you seen this new thing? Is incredibly valuable.
And I'll just add color to that because she nailed it. But similarly, like NIST CSF 2.0, there's a monitoring piece, right? If you're constantly monitoring, or at least you're aligning with your framework to monitor your environment, you can stumble upon things that you may have incorrectly assessed or create a solution for that creates security debt or technical debt or more risk down the line. As long as you are aligning and doing an appropriate risk management program from a technological perspective, I think you'll catch it. And I think that's when you'll have a tool that might be layered that might solve that issue as well. Or you might have a change in people or process that might address that risk as well. But I think monitoring and ongoing appropriate risk management is probably key right now.
I said I was going to ask you guys a softball one. I think I lied. I have a little bit more of something on the economic side of things because I think I draw some correlation to what happened when the cloud came out, right? Where like the reason that it worked and that it scaled was a lot of companies lowered their infrastructure costs, right? But now I talk to a ton of clients that have had AWS accounts for 5 years that they didn't even know about, spending 10 grand a month. Right now, this stuff works really well because it's a low barrier to entry and it's not too expensive. What do you guys foresee in the future? Do you think these companies might, when they're really ingrained in all of our workflows and you have all these orchestrated agents that you can never do without again, when the prices get jacked up, are we just SOL? I mean, they have to turn a profit eventually, like every software company does. So I'm curious what you guys think about that.
That was not a softball question. You
I know, I'm sorry.
Lied. You
I had another one. I can ask the other one if you want.
No, I'll take a stab at this and I'll let everyone, real quick. But we're seeing a shift between SaaS software from seat-based to consumption-based, right? A lot of agentic ecosystems or generative ecosystems allow for token optimization, which is going to drive your inherent costs down. A lot of these cloud environments allow you to run a model in isolation. And then we're also seeing that big foundation models are not very good at keeping their models from being distilled or stealing the brain behind it, right? So if I can run my model in isolation, maximize my token usage internally, I don't care what OpenAI or Anthropic jacks their prices up to. I'm worried about what AWS is going to jack their prices up to. And if my model's running in isolation, that's one, I can hedge my downside risk of future costs by not going to the model directly. Obviously, that limits some use cases, so on and so forth. Or you have NVIDIA coming out with localized data centers, right? AI-enabled data centers. So, or you can go to your value-added reseller and stand up physical infrastructure that can support AI. So now you can distill whatever model you want, bring that in-house, run it out of your own data center, and now the cost paradigm has shifted. Whereas cloud used to be, or used to be cheaper. Well, what about if I can maximize my token optimization and also these companies are getting cheaper and cheaper to run data because energy is more prevalent, and a lot of these companies are being more efficient, right? That's what I see from an economics perspective going forth is I can raise the cost in one area, but there's going to be savings on the inverse side.
Yeah, I'll add. I definitely think you're onto something in terms of the FinOps lessons of early cloud adoption. I was in the public cloud in 2012, 2013, and but I think the real lesson here is you have a developer that doesn't want to optimize their application, so we upsize the VM until it becomes too expensive, and the vendor, your comptroller comes after you, and you have to go through these cost-cutting exercise. But you need to know your workloads. You need to know how the tech works. You need to know where you can do caching, where you can, if you just check out and trust the SaaS vendor, trust the cloud vendor, you're going to lose. So you know your tech stack, know how it works, and also just keep up with the market. Knowing, GCP came along, and competition is good, and we've seen a significant, OpenAI, hey, they're running on their fumes now, right? Yeah, that's exactly. Being a little facetious, but the market changes radically.
Yeah. No, thank you so much, and panelists, thank you. Questions, thank you. I'm going to pass it over to Hannah.